Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us, Linda. That was a wonderful session this morning. Um, so we're going to get started here, folks. My name is Jared Gould, and I'm going to be your room host for this session. Do I have something I got to read to you, fellas? Here we go. All right. My name is Jared, like I said, and I'll be the virtual room host for today's workshop, which is the resilient brain, stress, and brain body practices. I would like to remind everyone of a few items before our presenter gets started today. Please feel free to use the chat box throughout the session. I will be keeping an eye on questions that we can ask at the end of the session. Also, please keep yourself on mute while the presenter is speaking. If you are calling in with an office phone, please do not put the call on hold, or else we will hear your lovely hold music. As a reminder, a link to our conference agreements can be found in the chat box. At the end of the workshop session, the presenter will stay online for 20 minutes for question and answers from participants. Also, do not forget to fill out the evaluation at the end of the workshop session to get entered into our drawing for door prizes at the closing of the session, closing session of the day today. Thank you all for being here today. Once again, our workshop is the Resilient Brain, Stress and Brain Body Practices. And it is being facilitated by the ever wonderful Linda Chamberlain. She is a scientist, author, and founder of the Alaska Family Violence Prevention Project. Dr. Linda Chamberlain has worked in the field of trauma for over 2 decades. Known for her abilities to translate science into practical strategies with diverse audiences, she is an internationally recognized keynote speaker who conveys a message of hope and empowerment. Her current focus is on a healing-centered framework with a strong emphasis on brain-mind-body practices to address how stress is stored in our bodies and our natural instinct to heal. Her skill-based presentations highlight simple tools that are appropriate for children, youth, and adults. Dr. Chamberlain, please take it away.
There we go. Hi, thank you very much, Jared. I'm just going to go ahead to share screen. So we are going into, actually, before we do that, we're going to do something to help our brains get ready. And maybe some of you have done this with me before. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to come back a little bit so you can see me. Again, everything an invitation, but if it feels okay to do so, we're going to do an exercise called switching, which is maybe something you do in your programs. Bring your arms out in front of you so that it be about shoulder height, straight out in front of you. And if you don't have shoulder issues, then maybe you can flip your thumbs down towards the floor. And you're going to cross your right hand over your left, interlace your fingers. While you have your arms out like this, go ahead and cross your left ankle over your right. So we've crossed the opposite way. And now bring your hands into your chest. Just rest them at your chest. And now let's do something even a little weirder. Let's take the tip of your tongue and put it at the back of your upper front teeth. Keep your tongue there. Hard to talk that way, so I'm going to move mine. And just take a breath or two in here, however you want, breathing however you want. Time to untangle your pretzel. Arms, legs. This is called switching. You may know it under another name. Maybe you've worked with Brain Gym before. It's popular in Brain Gym. I'm just going to work on sharing screen here as I chatter away. But we talked about the 2 hemispheres of the brain. And that is an exercise when you're changing topics, when you want to get brain balance, get both hemispheres to work together. As we talked about before, cross the body. What's the deal with the tongue? Well, there's certain areas that we're doing new work on what we call polyvagal strategies. And we're launching those that workshop in January, actually, with the ASDN School Leadership Initiative. And why is that when we understand more about our nervous system, just like our brain, we can do little things with the body that help to stimulate certain aspects of the nervous system that are calming. And placing the tip of the tongue near the roof of the mouth is where there's a big nerve that surfaces that we want to have a conversation with to be able to shift us into balance with the nervous system and the brain. So, this is very much a presentation about doing. We're going to be practicing some things. So, only do what's comfortable and safe to you. If you're under the care of a clinician for an issue that this maybe it would be better to talk to them first before doing this, then observing is great. And if you do something and it doesn't feel right in your brain, mind, body, then stop. Maybe do switching like we just did, crossing the body, taking a few breaths, or reaching out for assistance if needed. Take care of yourself. That's the bottom line. Do what feels culturally appropriate and safe for yourself. Understand that it takes a long time for science to catch up with people's way of knowing and cultural wisdom. So, things I'm talking about may seem really similar to something that you traditionally do. Go with the tradition and just consider the fact that I'm talking about something similar as being an affirmation that people have known for generations. And again, it takes science a while to catch up and some other cultures to catch up too. Just to say, when we talk about we're talking about resiliency and how to, grow resiliency. And that has everything to do with building relationship, which I understand is very much a focus of the event today. We always realize that the biggest resiliency factors are faith, hope, cultural traditions. And then where I work and what I'll be talking about today that can complement those big protective factors, resilience builders, are skills that help us to self regulate, that help the brain, body, and mind to be a team and work together, because that stress can affect, we can lose that when we're not aware. And it gives us a sense of what we call agency, perceived control. And that's super important for adolescents and for everyone right now. There are circumstances that we cannot control, but when there are things that we can control within us for ourselves, that really helps. The I'm going to come right to strategies and talk about the science around it without getting into the science slides. There is a thing in the body called relaxation response. When I'm sure you've all had conversations and probably training around what we call fight, flight, or freeze. That was a really important scientific discovery in the 1920s. Again, not like cultures didn't understand that the body would and the brain would work together to have a survival mechanism. But then so many decades later, research started looking at, hey, you know what? If the body has this way of protecting itself and getting they have the brain, always on the lookout for if something, is potentially a threat, then there must be a response that we can help, that the body helps itself, the instinct to heal, the instinct to balance and to be okay. And that is relaxation response. Just it is the anecdote to fight, flight, and freeze. And it is within all of us. And there are little ways that we can use movement, that we can use breath, that we can combine the two, that we can use sound. There's a reason, again, there's a reason why cultures have used rhythm and song and dance, or even the habit of humming. These work on the body and the nervous system in a way to calm it. So thinking about relaxation response and breath. If one of the things that they realized, without getting into chanting or things that may have different values and meanings to different cultures, what if we just took a word that makes a vibration in the body, like one, and take a breath in through the nose, if you can, And then exhale, and you don't even say it out loud. You say it to yourself. 1. I'm saying it out loud just because I'm the speaker. Let's do that another time or two. And now I'm not even saying it out loud. That actually creates, there's a rhythm in saying it, even to yourself without out loud. There's a vibration. And this is a simple thing that done even, just for a minute, maybe just doing it a few times could notice that you feel any differently than before you started. So and then you can think about traditions of making certain sounds and such. They speak to the nervous system, which speaks to the brain, which balances the brain and the body in a way that we can come into our prefrontal cortex, that we can calm our whole system. This is science, but it goes back to generations and thousands of years of tradition as well. So we just use the neutral word 1. And that was the research that's what was done at Harvard around this. I want to mention to you, because you have a resource from this organization. I am a trainer with Capacitar International, which is a international healing network. Well, obviously, I come to this world from looking at the science to decide what practices. The Capacitar is working with over 40 countries. Their toolkit, which you have a link to in the resource list, is translated into over 20 languages, or you can just go to capacitar.org. I use many different modalities, but many that I mentioned today will be in the Capacitar toolkit. I know that if you were interested in translating their toolkit into a language in Alaska, that they would be open and working to do that. It is their mission is popular education approach, and that's why they're a guiding force in my life. We want tools that if we go into a refugee camp, if we go into an area of conflict, whatever the circumstances are, and maybe you are told you have 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, can people leave with 3 things that they could do that 6-year-old could teach an adult, that adult could teach a 12-year-old, etc. That is the mission. And in my opinion, science is important. I would think that because I'm biased and I'm a scientist. But you know what? If you don't get science translated into tools that are in the hands of community and deliver the science to, then you better rethink what you're doing as a scientist. So I see Capacitar as the translator of that information into tools, and you can check them out. So very important tool. We are all under stress in a lot of different ways. I've had the privilege in my career of getting to work with a lot of domestic violence shelters and family programs. And we, because of the work we do, we are exposed to the suffering of others. And even when it isn't directly in our lives, that can affect us. And we need tools, not just for the people we work with, but the tools for ourselves. And so when I kind of had that juncture in my life where I was doing a lot of trauma work and not getting enough support around building resilience, I had some problems. And I wish at the time I had known some of these very simple tools, and it would lead me to find them. Everyone should know this point, this pressure point under the nose. Wildlife biologists know it because when an animal is darted and then resuscitated, if they're not coming to quickly enough the way expected, they may dry needle this point under the nose. What we can do with this point is that it is very good point for anxiety, panic, blood pressure spike. When we see someone injured, as I did when someone fell in the airport and wanted to get up because people were kind of, encouraging them to get up, but they had an open fracture. I'm an injury epidemiologist. I knew they shouldn't move. So I said to them, I know this point. Can I do it for you, or can I show you how to do it? So the points I'm going to talk about, I'm saying this because we can do it for ourselves. We can offer to do it for someone else. We can offer to teach someone else. The index finger under the point of the nose, pressure here, much pressure, moderate. And if you make things hurt, then you're going in the opposite direction, because you're going to get the survival brain on board. We are, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to turn my hand this way so it doesn't affect you hearing me. We are systems of energy moving around, circulatory, chemical, energy, synaptic, and so forth, and the magnetic. So kids' systems move much faster. Their respiration, their heart rate's faster. They'll respond more quickly. So a minute might be fine. With an adult, maybe 2 minutes, or not in an okay situation of pressure here. Think of Temple Grandin working with the cows, the cattle industry, pressure people, watch people around you, watch yourself, because people intuitively understand and do things such as pressure. So that they may automatically do, and then this makes more sense to them to use a point for a particular issue. I could sit at my desk and, if I was in a public situation like court or something, and maybe just rest my knuckle here, and I would hit that point. I mention this because I'm thinking of a situation where an attorney was talking about representing a youth that was going into a legal setting where they were putting their finger under their nose like this. See, they intuitively knew pressure, that pressure would help them to feel okay, but people were worried about, in this particular setting, how this would look. So, the conversation was a different way about this point. But when I get to finger holds, I want you to take note, because they also talked about how this youth could use finger holds and hold their hands in their lap, and no one would notice. So simple ways. And since I'm mentioning that, I'm going to mention another point. So see the side of my hand here? Doesn't matter which hand, by the way, when we're doing things like this. I'm going to take my index finger and I'm going to follow down my pinky. And I'm going to come to where we kind of could say the wrist, where the real bony part of the hand ends. And then we have the part where it's, you can start to feel tendons and stuff. So I've stopped at the bony edge and come just down. And can you feel a divot there? A little spot where you could take your index finger and kind of press in a little bit between. You're not on the tendons, ligaments and such, you're in between. That's another great point as a stressor point. And I could do that and hold it in my lap, and no one would realize. These are in the Capacitar toolkit, so don't feel like you have to memorize anything. I work in schools a lot, training all the faculty, staff of schools, and this is one we often talk about. And I see some of you now. So interlace your fingers and bring your fingers behind the back of your head, the ball of your head. I'm going to spin around for a moment. How do I know my hands are in the right place? Well, let your thumbs drop down, and your thumbs are going to land in this picture where the cranium, the bone, stops, so that you could actually press the thumbs that are hanging down in on each side. And when you do so, you are going to be at 2 acupoints there. Now, it's interesting because, first of all, anybody notice their breathing change with their arms up like this? Yeah, because you've opened the chest, and especially if you have the arms out, better not to be like this, better to be like that. You've already opened the chest up, for breathing. You're freeing the diaphragm. The diaphragm gets stuck with stress. And that's going to, and breathing from the upper chest begets more stress. It begets going limbic. So this is great. But these are 2 points for emotional heaviness, stress, and then biomechanically, I would say breath, because of how the arms are up. And again, how much pressure? We're talking, or how long? It's just that with pressure points, you just want to feel, that you are putting some, a mild to moderate pressure there and holding it for a couple minutes with finger holds. We'll talk about that. We do a little bit longer. And here we are at finger holds. Let's see. I'm going to mention one more thing. I know most of you are working with adolescents, but are working with adolescents, and this comes up more talking about younger kids, but the pressure point is still important. We also use holds, and holds like pressure points, and I could talk about a lot more, points for sure, but we can do those for ourselves, and we can do them for someone else. Have you ever had a grandchild, or you're holding a friend's child or nephew or whatever in your lap maybe, and they're maybe not so unhappy about something, start swirling around or upset, and they start pressing their forehead against you, or you see them, if you're not holding them, pressing their forehead against something? This is a kind of a classic against the think the prefrontal cortex. Pressure on the prefrontal cortex with a hold. We're using our whole hand, and the head hold for this actually uses the other hand too. So it's kind of fun, because I'm going to show you my hand in the back. I've got that hand on my survival brain. You could kind of say we're doing a handhold from survival brain in the back, the lower part of the head, to the front of the brain. This is a very calming hold. And I see kids, younger kids particularly, often looking for pressure against the forehead. I think it's why when we use eye pillows, which really shouldn't be directly on the eyes, rather if you took something and put some a Labrador tea in it, or some spruce needles and such, something that would be a calming and culturally relevant scent with a little weight, and just filled a little piece of cloth with that. People in yoga use, eye bags and stuff, but never put it directly on the eyes. You don't want the pressure there, but on the forehead. It's very calming. And just as a little school example, I'm thinking I'm going to weave in some stories. Hopefully I've got enough time to do that. But little guy in a classroom, not so little, like 7, 8, is when he gets dysregulated, he's running around the room and he's pressing his head sometimes on not good idea surfaces like the window and stuff. And he's out of his seat, but which is an issue. But when he got really dysregulated, he ran out of the classroom, and down to the boys' room. And what they discovered, of course, that wasn't okay, because he didn't have, permission, disruptive, got to know what he's doing and so forth. What was he doing? It was brilliant. And this again is the instinct. Listen to the instinct of your body, and talking with these kids, and you're the detective. You're the self-regulation detective. He goes into the stall, he sits on the toilet, and he's pressing his head against the cool metal. Hard surface, beautiful. Temperature difference, excellent. See, it's more sensory input. It's going to focus him on the sensory, as opposed to why you need to shift the attention from the train, the fast rolling train, the glitter bottle that's into senses and body, and he gets the information of cool, and he gets pressure. And pressure speaks to the nervous system in an amazing way. So he knew what to do, but they needed to create a circumstance where he could have some other tools. So he learned finger holds. He also, learned about, pressure on his forehead without having to leave his seat. We want a whole toolkit of options. And that's my world, is lots of different things that use different modalities. So now we'll talk about finger holds. And if I have some time at the end, I'm making a little note to myself. I might mention a few more things about pressure, but I want to make sure we cover what we can here. This is another pressure technique, though, so we're not done with that yet. You have a 2-page handout from the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. Finger holds are, they come from a number of different cultures. And I just want to acknowledge this because when I have gone to villages across the bay here, I'm outside of Homer, or elsewhere in the state, it has been said to me, oh, my auntie, that grandma, when someone would get upset, we would massage the fingers. So as I talk about finger holds, just think about, maybe is this validating another a different cultural tradition, and go with that. The point is that having something that works like this with the body and brings in breath and creates comfort for the body to be able to tell the brain that it's okay. Because the direction, see, we do a lot of top-down brain stuff, cognitive behavioral therapy, any kind of talk intervention, it's top-down. And the problem is that if I'm dysregulated, I'm not in the upper part of the brain that you're trying to talk to. We have to use the body first to reel us in so that we can then get upstairs. That's another topic unto itself. So finger holds, but these are the kind of tools I'm going to talk about, using when talking to, therapists and school nurses and so forth. So finger holds, doesn't matter which hand. The way it works is in the connection, connect and emotion with each finger. I'm going to turn this into an SEL, a social emotional learning tool. And I know you probably work with a lot of SEL resources. So how about we start finger holds, whether we are an adult, because this is actually used in my world with adults. I come from a culture that really sucks at expressing emotions and teaching us as children to be able to identify and feel emotions. So it's never too late. And we, with an adolescent or whatever age, draw the hand. Then we're going to brainstorm about words that are not just age appropriate, but culturally appropriate, that kind of line up with these words, because the thumb is sadness, basically, tears, grief, emotional pain, sadness. This finger is the fear finger. Not going to give you the finger, as I always say, but this is anger, rage, resentment. I'm on the middle finger. Hey, ever watch people spin their rings? You can just guess that the fourth finger is the worry finger, anxiety. And then the little finger depends, what age and so forth. They say lack of self-esteem, but, kids say, feel like I don't matter. Little kids that feel small, don't count. That's the little finger. So you're going to brainstorm then around our tracing and write down some words about how words that we use for those feelings. We're doing some emotional literacy work here. We're going to have some cool stuff to color and decorate that hand. And I didn't include pictures today from a batterers intervention group, but I'm talking about adult men in very multicultural settings who do this, to be able to express emotions to their children when they're having supervised visitation and such. We need ways to express. So that's where we can start with this practice, and having stones and, little stones and glitter and glue and just, cool stuff to stick there, but as a means of expression, involve all the senses. Preaching to the choir here, I know, because to do that multimodality and sensory input, and maybe even some scents. So you bringing smell into it with some different, whether it's lavender or spruce or whatever. So the practice itself. This technique, described in detail in your handout, I can go in either direction, left-handed, so I'm going to use this as my doer hand, is that we are going to we're going to think about this emotion when you're learning to do this practice. We would actually work through all the fingers. And then as we have played with it a bit, we'll go directly to a finger. I'll explain why I think that's important. But the actual practice itself, wrapping the fingers around the thumb, is starting at the beginning of the hand. And this is our sadness, tears finger. How tightly do I hold? Again, it's moderate, because what people will sometimes say to me is, "Hey, I've got my pulse." I'm like, "Hey, let go." So you've got a finger, because it's not where you take your pulse, okay? But the fact of the matter is, when you are doing finger hold practice, and in this practice, we will be holding that finger, thinking about that emotion. We're going to bring our breath into it such that we visualize that we can actually breathe that emotion out through that finger, thinking about that emotion. And how long do we hold? This is longer than an acupoint. With kids, it's often, depending on age and stuff, a couple minutes. But if I'm having a really strong emotion, or maybe I'm that kid sitting in that courtroom, and this is kind of my, way to just deal with overwhelming feelings that I don't want to overwhelm me, I might hold on to this finger in my lap for 5 minutes. And I'm just thinking about identifying and breathing out that emotion. And while I'm doing that, if it is a really strong emotion, I may feel some pulsing. It's not your pulse, it's pulsing, because again, we are energy constantly moving around. So I, in a former position, was sitting in on a budget meeting, and I knew I was going to be, leaving this particular job situation. I was super upset about what I was hearing in terms of directions where some funding was going, and I knew I had to be cautious about what I said. Now I wanted to respond versus react. That's when this comes into play. We want to be able to think through what we're going to say, what we're going to do, what are the consequences. So I was holding my worry finger in my lap. And for some reason, I decided to move to my middle finger. It was an interesting thing for me to do, because my family tradition is to be passive aggressive. We don't want to be aggressive part, but because we are passive and do not say what we are really feeling, and we do not identify our feelings, they come out later in kind of ways that you don't expect, not and often against in a situation that is completely inappropriate. That's a good reason why you need to get in touch with your emotions. And they also, when they stay inside like that unexpressed, they tend to make us sick. Stomach hurts, joints hurt, etc. And you don't have to be old to have that kind of reaction to stress. On that moment, when I moved my hand to my middle finger, I realized I was angry too. Something that we're kind of been trained to deny. That was important to know. So when I went in that moment, how I was really feeling. And a point of this is that too, children, youth, and adults often don't recognize that they're having more than one emotion at a time. We can have a bit of a feedback loop by moving, even though I knew I was really worried, moving through the rest of the fingers to understand that there was another emotion there, and not letting it get stuck there, because you know what? You cannot run from an emotion. And when we suppress or deny them or pretend they're not there, they unfortunately express in the body getting stuck, again, making us not feel well, sometimes bursting out at other times with someone else in a completely inappropriate way. So this is a simple but powerful practice that can start with emotional literacy. It then comes into using pressure, integrating the breath into it. So, we have that ability we are focusing. So there's a focusing or a mindful element in it, identifying emotion, and visualizing, breathing it out. Something very simple that has a great deal to it. And we'll welcome any questions about this at the end. Oh, I'm just going to mention, because I'm very interested in training now to be working more with grief. Which I think, of course, it's an issue in every way in our lives, but we are going to be dealing with much more grief right now. And when I trained in finger holds, more than half of my class were hospice workers. And when my mother was dying, I was and not able to speak or communicate, we did finger holds. We we carry so much in us and need, and unfortunately, if it doesn't have an opportunity to express in its life, then it can cause a lot of challenges at the ends of our lives. And we are just looking for ways to be able to share, express, and be together. And I was able to do that even though we couldn't speak. So this was one of my sled dogs, Clay. I saw a message in the chat box during the keynote that, once a musher, always a musher. Thank you. And it kind of brings tears to my eyes because I always feel that way. I didn't race. I would work with injured dogs would come into me, my little kennel, and I'd work with them. And Clay was one of those dogs. And I usually have to explain this to people in the lower 48, but you totally know what this is, right? It's not an Alaskan who doesn't understand anticipation, energy, and we talk about stress like it's always negative. Positive stress, excited. I want to go. I want to go. I want to do. But that's still stress in the body that animals know to let out through shaking. And then some cultures, like my own, have tried to repress shaking. One of the things that I learned fairly early on in my work is if it's not an issue of safety, even when someone is injured, or just situations of trouble, excitement, happy or otherwise, it is not a weakness to shake. It is a smart body to shake. And when you restrain someone in a difficult situation from shaking, if it's not needed to do so because of safety, you really increase the risk of post-traumatic stress. So we, very much want to let this happen. And I'm just trying to get to the next slide here. Dogs know to do it. Bears know to, you see the animal kingdom do this in their own way. So how about we translate? I trained in tension and trauma releasing exercise because I work with the military and I look at what the military centers of excellence lets in the door. It is a huge influence on me because they have a very high threshold on evidence. And I have to be able to turn around when I'm working with governments and so forth and to say, how can you prove this? How can you talk about this? This is a series of exercises that are used to fatigue the big muscles and intentionally create shaking to help veterans and active duty soldiers who are dealing with PTSD or post-traumatic stress. And that would be the way it's done would be hard to do in a classroom, but there are folks who then translate it. And this is a great example in a super book that came out last year, The Eyes Are Never Quiet, Listening Beneath the Behaviors of Our Most Troubled Students. We're going to use pressure, then we're going to release, and then we're going to intentionally shake it out. So I'm going to move a little bit further away. Everything is an invitation. Boy, we've been bringing our arms up in our air, and let's do it again. So arms up in the air, and now just, take a breath in, and then exhale, let them drop. And this is your first chance to shake it out because you get better at this. And when we do full body in a room together, it's great. Now, hands on top of the head, and inhale as you squeeze. You don't do anything till it hurts. Just squeeze your head as you take a breath in. Squeezing the scalp. Now drop the hands. Maybe your shoulders let go too as you exhale and shake it out. Now the cheeks. Take a breath in, press. Own pace. Drop your hands. and shake it out. And everybody has a different rhythm of the breath. So I know I'm talking through it and you go with what feels okay. If you're slow or faster, we all have our own rhythm. Cross the arms so that your hands are on the forearms. My right hand's going to squeeze my left forearm, left hand on the right forearm, and take a breath in, squeezing, and let it go. Exhale and shake it out. Last one. Oh, I saw some good shaking there. Way to go, Jared. Okay, interlace the fingers. And now just press as you, not, reasonably, be gentle, I guess. And they take a breath in, squeeze. And I'm going to do like I saw Jared doing and just kind of shaking the hands out. Do a good shake with the hands. Because you know what? Here's, why do we see so many joint issues, small joint issues relative to stress and toxic stress, which is what trauma can become, unaddressed, because the kind of stress gets written in the body, gets very stuck in the joints and the small joints. And just the stress of being on that keyboard 7-8 hours a day, do stuff like this. It will help you. We're, lubricating the joints here. So let's just I'm going to do starfish hands, arms out in front. Take a breath as you make starfish with your hands. Open the hands. Now exhale, softness. 2 more times, your own pace. Starfish, big starfish. Exhale, soft fists. I lost count. 1 more time. I do that with seniors because we need to keep our joints moving, but I'm doing that with you because you are on keyboard so much, and so are the teens that you're working with. Tension and trauma releasing exercise for self-regulation. I'm happy to talk with any of you more about that if you need more information. Now, checking the clock there, we have a little more than 15 minutes before questions. I want to take us through emotional freedom technique tapping. Just like finger holds, when you think about finger holds and doing things with the fingers, in some cultures, releasing stress, like in Indonesia and such, putting the hands in soil. Why is gardening so comforting, so soothing? So many people in my field are, I'm not, but master gardeners, thinking about how kids would self-soothe with, sucking their thumb or playing with fingers. This comes back to, the instinct of the body again, and lots of different traditions. I would say tapping is very true as well, because first of all, when we tap on the body, we're creating a rhythm. So again, think of, drumming, think of singing, think of breathing, because breathing is a rhythm. And we are grasping the ring. Tapping was developed by some therapists who were kind of hitting the wall with typical talk therapy, which, also, talking about problems is not everyone's cultural tradition, number one. And we want resources that maybe are things that we can do for ourselves as well. A lot of therapists are now using and teaching folks tapping, but we learn how to do it for ourselves as just well-being practice, nevertheless, for dealing with stress and challenges. And I also want to mention that it's used for performance. It's used by athletes. I tap always before I speak. I tapped this morning. I tapped every morning this week because it's been a busy week. And I want to direct you to some free resources, because whenever I can find free, I'm really into it. And that's what your resource list has quite a few too. Battle tap. Yeah, it comes from the military for sure. because young men and women were coming home and were not able to get enough help, and the help that they were getting wasn't effective enough, and to deal with the stress that they were returning to and bringing with them. And it's been expanded to any of us can, go in. It teaches public service professionals how to tap. And I'm going to mention some other resources, but they're really great. This is very much by the people, for the people, with a lot of good information online that we can access anonymously. So when I'm training like docs and pediatricians and stuff, they're like, I don't see this as real. And I used to review for my first public health degree. I would go and review the drug studies that were getting drugs approved, just like the vaccine studies right now. It's how I put myself through my first graduate degree. I was no spring chicken at the time. And I would see the size of the study populations, and they were not huge. And the interesting thing is that we have over 100 clinical studies for tapping, looking organized by looking at stress. It was initially found to be extremely effective for phobias, but it's used in different countries and cultures around test anxiety. Athletes use it, chronic pain. It has a lot of different applications. And the interesting thing is that there's so much data on it that they have something that we never see with a drug study. Meta-analysis, where you can take a bunch of studies, put them together because the data is good enough, and then look at the effect size. And the effect size is large. It means that this helps a lot of people. And the interesting thing about tapping is when we look at side effects, if you don't like it, you stop doing it. So we don't have to worry about some of the things that we do with other interventions, and we can quickly learn to do it. How does it work? Basically, is we're having a conversation through the body with the brain. We are going to use what we call a setup statement that talks about the problem, the exposure, and it pairs it with a positive affirmation. So you can see that there's some positive psychology in here, mixed in here, with having a conversation with the body of tapping acupoints as well, and sending a new calming signal to the brain instead of the groove that the brain gets in relative to I don't feel okay, I don't like that, my heartbeat goes up and so forth. So we can derail stress response. We can reduce stress hormones like cortisol. And the crazy cool thing about it is when we talk about intergenerational trauma and issues, epigenetic issues, remember, epigenetics is a toggle switch. It can get switched on maybe for something to get past intergenerationally that we're worried about, like trauma. But you change environment, you give tools, and you can switch that puppy off. It's a two-way street. So we want tools that help us to do that. And there is even research on tapping showing that it can reverse the epigenetic effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. So I better get to it, huh? If I'm going to go through 2 rounds of tapping, because we have enough time to do that, what I'm going to say to you is that if you choose to tap with me, to either just go through the tapping points with me so that you can experience it, and not be distracted by the other components of it at first. Or if you want to choose an issue that is on a scale of 0 to 10, what we call our level of discomfort, because we can measure how, one of the powerful things, and it's why it's so easy to evaluate, is we measure how we're doing at the start and then at the end. We're practicing this, we're learning this, we're on Zoom. You don't pick even a 5 or a 6, pick a 2 or a 3. I'm going to pick something this morning. If I open my emails before I start an assignment, I can get really distracted. I got an email from an international aid agency that I really wanted. I'm interested in working with them, but they've been slow in responding and setting a date. And now I got an email from them this morning that's like, how about basically a week from now? To do this work. And I was like, and it's a special thing I'd be doing for them. And I was just I was unsettled and ticked and trying to decide what to do because I really want to do it. And I was telling them that we needed some time to talk about this. And it's government. It's not how it's working out. So I'll say that I was probably between a 3 and a 4 distracted with this. And I'm just going to, so that's the issue I'm going to choose to work on. To give you an example, on that scale, I'll give it a 4, because it was I had to stop thinking about it and focus on the fact that I was going to be with you, because I was like, what about this? What about that? The train started running, and they've been so unresponsive. So how's it going to be to work with them? Blah, blah, blah. And so I'll call it December 1st is going to be my reminder phrase about it, because as we work on points, we want to remind ourselves of the problem. So I've chosen my issue. I've picked a reminder phrase, or maybe I'll just say that event. And I've picked my number on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 would be, it's not bothering me. And I'm just going to tap like I did before I spoke today, because it just kind of calms and settles and gets me into the sweet spot of being very present. But I'm not a 0. We're going to start, the way tapping starts, if you look at this diagram, is we start by tapping. We use 3 fingers basically on the side of our hands. And what we're going to do, I'm going to explain it first and then we'll go through it, is I'm going to repeat a setup statement. And you have a resource about tapping. You can look at tapping solution online for lots of examples for kids, whether they're adolescents or younger. But a statement for a youth or adult would be that they name the problem and then they follow it with an affirmation. And so along the lines of, even though I'm worried about that event, I deeply and completely accept myself. And I'm going to tap on the side of my hand. I'm going to say it out loud while I repeat it 3 times. But if you were doing something, chose an issue, you could just repeat it, silently to yourself. And then we're going to go through the points. And here are the points. They are going to start at the inside of the eyebrow. We're going to go to the outside of the eyebrow. We're going to go under the pupil of the eye. We're going to tap 10 to 12, like a dozen times in each point. Then I'm going to go to one hand. I want to just show you them all first. Whoa, are we surprised to go here under the nose? Not at all. Important acupoint. Now we're going to come under the lower lip. Then I want you to feel where the heads of your clavicles are, your collarbones. Feel how, the head, they get a little anatomy in here good too, body awareness. See where those heads are? Go right underneath, because your thymus gland, by the way, think immunity, is there. The military's done some very interesting research about how tapping can boost immunity. Then we're going to go to kind of like this monkey gorilla point. I'm going to stand up for a moment. Bring your thumbs about 3 to 4 inches below your armpits and just explore gently. Can you find a point that's a little more sensitive than the others? I assure you, when you find it, you may just be in the vicinity as you experiment with this, but when you find that point that's a little more sensitive below the armpit several inches, you will know it. We have these sensory zones that are just more responsive. So I'm going to take us through a round now, and then a quick follow-up round, and then we'll transition to questions and answers. So I start with my hand. Either hand, doesn't matter. I'm going to say it out loud because we're in this type of practice session. Even though I'm concerned about that event, I deeply and completely accept myself. I don't have to close my eyes. I just sometimes do that as a habit, to keep your eyes open. Even though I'm really worried about that event so soon, I know I can do it. I deeply and completely accept myself. You find the words. Even though I'm concerned about that event, I deeply and completely accept myself. Now we're going to go to the round of tapping with 2 fingers on each hand. If you have one hand, then just use one hand. We're going to start at the inside of the eyebrow, and we're going to tap 10 to 12 times. How hard? Never hard. Just sense the vibration, especially as we work through the body. I'm going to go to the outside of the eyebrow, and I am thinking about my reminder phrase. You need to focus on the exposure. That email, I didn't know what to, they're really asking for something unique. I'm surprised. And that event, now I'm under my pupils. I'm reminding myself of why I was upset, unsettled about this request last minute. Now one hand under the nose, 10 to 12 times, focused on the issue. Under the lower lip. Want you to tune into the vibration when you go under the collarbone, the clavicle. There is a resonance in the body when you tap there. I see people sometimes, again, just intuitively sitting in a courtroom talking to a service provider, tapping there. Now, down to the monkey, gorilla, under tender spot. And I'm just standing up so I can give you a sense of where that is, but it's great to stand up too. And now, we're going to come, I didn't do this in the beginning, we're going to come all the way up. I think I forgot to show up to the top of the head, where if you parted your hair in the middle, there are 3 acupoints in a row up there, both hands, all fingers on board. Okay, stop. And now, don't think about your reminder phrase. Don't think about anything. Just take a couple of breaths in and out. Now I'm going to come back to my scale and I'm going to check in. How am I feeling about this thing that I'm working on? Well, I was working on it before we started, frankly. And so I'm kind of excited. It's sometimes you have to take some risk and for some opportunity, but maybe I'm still feeling like a 3. We're just going to go through one more round in our last couple minutes here of tapping, if you choose to, just to get a sense of it one more time. And then I'll talk about resources and stop. And I'm not going to talk so much. So we would start, we've scored ourselves, we go back here. Even though I'm worried about this event, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I'm worried about such a short time period, I know I can do this. Even though I've got some reservations about this situation, I know that this is going to be important and worthwhile for me to do. Tapping now, coming to the inside of the eyebrow, outside, thinking about why I was concerned, why I was upset, down beneath the eyes, under the pupils. By the way, this is an acupoint for used for addiction and guilt issues. There are lots of applications of points under the nose. We know that this is a very important calming point. Under the lower lip. Under the collarbone. There was some reason I couldn't use both hands. I could totally do it with one. Now I'm going to go on that point down beneath my armpit. Back up, top of the head to finish off. And I'm going to check back in. I have to say that in my toolkit, I find that tapping to be a very important tool. One point I was working with the school system up north early on in my work. We didn't have maybe the number of studies that we have now about tapping, and I chose not to talk about tapping. And couple months later, I was in the airport in Anchorage, where I used to live practically. And there's a particular bench I would sleep on. And if people actually knew, they could find me there, because it always has to wait for the morning flight to Homer. And the superintendent from that school district came up to me, saw me there because they were flying outside, and said, "Hey, we wanted to talk to you. We were talking about the different things that you talked about and stuff. And we had a little guy we were having a lot of issues with and stuff, and just a lot of things going on. And the school nurse heard about tapping. And that's when I realized I would never not include tapping, no matter how much time, because it was a game changer for this little fellow. We need, it's a toolkit of lots of different tools. With kids, we're going to word it a little bit differently, that we get to the positive very quickly. I just did a little wording here about COVID. I want to stay well, so worried about my friends. We'll be okay. Don't want my family to get sick, miss my friends. I'm okay. Good to care about one another. We can play with this to come up with, we shift to the positive very quickly. We have a simpler setup statement. Even though I'm worried about COVID, I am okay. There are, and some people will, do a fewer number of points. I watch kids just tapping on their thighs, on the tops of their, on the bottom of their thighs above their knees. Well, you know what? That's actually a point and a practice called resource tapping. So we don't, like, this is too complicated and I want to do all this. Actually, kids learn it really fast, but that's okay. So just mention a couple resources here and stop. I know that there's some rec room folks here today, and I got to work in the past with the rec room, and they recorded these practices and little sound bites, including tapping, and they've had it, and I assume still have it online the last time I checked via YouTube. So just a way to share these with other youth and such. I just appreciate all the work you do. There are free resources like tapping in schools. If you go in there and give them your email, you're going to get a lot of emails. But in addition to the stuff that they sell, they have free stuff like this Tapping in Schools Quick Start Guide. So they can be a great resource. And I think now is time for me to stop sharing here so that we can share more in the process of questions and answers. Thank you for your patience and doing this work with me. A great thing, I teach a type of meditation online through that I was exposed to through the military. And I feel better. I'm teaching it, but I feel better after I've done it with the folks that I'm with. And so that's how I feel right now with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chamberlain. Once again, everyone, please join me in thanking Dr. Linda Chamberlain for today's workshop. I don't know if we've got clapping reactions or silent snaps, however works. We greatly appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. Everyone, please make sure to fill out your evaluation for this workshop so you can get entered in for our drawing for door prizes at our final session of the day today. This workshop has concluded. However, if you would like to stay and ask questions for Dr. Chamberlain, or you have a discussion with our presenter, the Zoom room will remain open for the next 20 minutes or so. Otherwise, have a fabulous, fantastic rest of the conference. Happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah, truly. I'm just looking at the chat room here to see if there's any questions, or you can just come on live, I think, which is great. Oh, what was the Battle Tap website? I believe, I don't want to bring my slides up again to go back, but let me just, I think I have it right here. But I also know that if you search Battle Tap, it's battletap.org. So battletap.org. I'm going to mention another one too for tapping. There's an entity, EFT Universe. Universe. Let me see. I'm just trying to, I'm going to put that in. Oh, I think that's going to you, Jared. So let me get everybody here. EFT Universe is another great resource, and it's eftuniverse.com. Hope I'm not misspelling there. They, what's happened in some arenas, I work with Heart Math, it's another one, and EFT Universe, they are putting the research as it's published. If you're not connected to a university, if you're not university based, then typically you have to pay 35 to 50 bucks per medical article to get it. And then there's the fact that who wants to sit around reading 100 medical articles, but we won't even go there. The lovely thing is EFT Universe is organizing and posting open access, the research by the application, like stress versus phobia, etc. And you can go on their website and just access this information. They also have a pretty big document that's free that compiles the research, and it's got a lime green cover and says EFT Universe. As you're at their website, you'll usually get a message that will offer that if you give them your email, which again is always an issue for information, although they're not too bad really about sending stuff out. But you can download this document for free that summarizes the research. Are there any songs for kids that you know of to help them learn tapping? What a great question.